New York studio apartments are the most expensive small spaces in the world, and some of the most luxurious. Not because of what they contain, because of what their price demands. Here is exactly what that discipline looks like, and how to apply it anywhere. There is a paradox at the heart of New York studio living that takes most people by surprise the first time they encounter it. The apartments are small, genuinely, often shockingly small by the standards of almost any other city in the world. And yet the best ones feel more luxurious, more considered, and more genuinely desirable than apartments 3 times their size in cities where space is cheap. The explanation for this paradox is economic before it is aesthetic. When space costs what it costs in Manhattan, every square foot carries a price that makes waste psychologically intolerable. New Yorkers cannot afford to have a corner of their studio that serves no purpose, a surface that holds objects without function or meaning, a piece of furniture that merely fills space rather than earning it. The cost of space forces the precision of intention that most interior design philosophies recommend, but few people actually achieve. Constraint, it turns out, is one of the most reliable producers of luxury available, because luxury, at its most fundamental, is not about abundance. It is about the complete absence of anything that should not be there. In a city built upward rather than outward, it is unsurprising that New York interior design has developed a more sophisticated relationship with vertical space than almost any other domestic tradition in the world. Where most apartment dwellers think horizontally, about floor area, about furniture arrangement, about the space between walls, New Yorkers think in 3 dimensions, treating the full height of the room as usable space rather than as the distance between furniture and ceiling. Floor-to-ceiling shelving that makes the 8 or 9-foot ceiling feel like an asset rather than a limitation. Storage solutions that climb the walls rather than spreading across the floor. Art hung high enough to draw the eye upward and make the room feel considerably taller than its actual dimensions. A loft bed platform in the most space-limited studios that creates an entirely separate functional zone beneath it, desk, seating, storage, where only a sleeping area would otherwise exist. The vertical dimension is the New York studio's secret weapon, the unused space that, once claimed, effectively doubles the functional capacity of the apartment without adding a single square foot to its floor plan. One of the defining challenges of studio apartment living, and one that New Yorkers have addressed with more creativity and more variety of solution than any other urban population, is the creation of distinct functional zones within a single room. The studio, by definition, contains everything in one space: sleeping, living, working, eating, and sometimes cooking, all happening within the same 4 walls. The question is whether these functions feel collapsed together or whether they feel genuinely distinct. And the answer determines whether the studio feels cramped or whether it feels like a home with multiple rooms. New York studios create zone distinction not through walls, but through the layering of rugs, lighting, ceiling treatments, and furniture arrangement. A specific rug defines the living zone. A pendant light hanging low over the dining table defines the eating zone. A curtain, not a wall, drawn between the sleeping area and the living space creates privacy and psychological separation without reducing the room's actual dimensions. Each zone is complete in itself while remaining part of the same continuous, considered space. Of all the design decisions available to a New York studio dweller, lighting is the one that delivers the most immediate and most dramatic transformation for the least structural intervention. And New Yorkers, who have developed a particular expertise in maximizing impact per dollar and per square foot, have learned to treat lighting as the primary design investment rather than the afterthought. A single extraordinary pendant light hanging over the dining area, sculptural, oversized relative to the table beneath it, chosen as deliberately as a piece of art, elevates the entire studio from a room with a table to a dining room that happens to share its walls with a living room. A floor lamp with an architectural shade in the corner of the seating area creates a pool of warm light that defines the zone and makes the sofa feel like the center of a room rather than a piece of furniture pushed against a wall. In a New York studio, lighting is not illumination. It is architecture, the means by which distinct spaces are created, moods are established, and the quality of luxury is communicated to everyone who enters the room. Every New York studio that feels genuinely luxurious contains one piece of furniture or one object that is, by the standards of a small apartment, excessive, something larger, more expensive, more extraordinary than strict practicality would justify. A velvet sofa in a color that most designers would call too bold for a small space. An antique dining table that seats 6 in a studio where 2 would be more sensible. A piece of art that cost more than the monthly rent. This one extraordinary piece is not an accident or an indulgence. It is a deliberate design strategy, the single investment that signals to everyone who enters the room and to the person who lives there every day that this is not a space where practicality was the only consideration, that someone lived here with enough conviction in their own taste to make one decision that went beyond what was strictly necessary. The extraordinary piece justifies everything around it. The restraint of the other surfaces honors it. The edited quality of the rest of the studio gives it the space to be fully experienced. And in being fully experienced, it makes the entire studio feel luxurious in a way that no amount of careful, practical furnishing ever could. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of New York studio design is the consistent preference for dark, deep color palettes in spaces where most design advice would recommend light and pale tones to maximize the sense of space. Charcoal gray walls, deep forest green, ink blue that is almost black, warm tobacco brown. These are not the colors of timidity or of designers following a formula for making small rooms feel larger. They are the colors of conviction, chosen because they make the studio feel like something specific rather than something generic. The psychological reason dark palettes work in small, well-designed spaces is that they eliminate the room's boundaries rather than pushing them outward. A pale room always shows its edges, the corner where walls meet, the line where wall meets ceiling, confirming the room's actual dimensions to the brain. A dark room absorbs those edges, making the boundaries of the space less legible and the room feel, paradoxically, less confined. Dark color in a New York studio also communicates something important about the person who chose it, a willingness to commit, to live with depth and drama rather than with the safe neutrality that appeals to everyone and belongs to no one. New York studio storage is not a problem to be solved after the design is complete. It is part of the design, considered from the beginning, integrated into the architecture of the space, and executed with the same precision that a structural engineer brings to a load-bearing wall. built-in shelving that spans an entire wall from floor to ceiling, designed around the specific objects it will hold rather than as a generic storage solution. A platform bed with drawers below whose dimensions were determined by what needs to be stored in them rather than by standard bed frame proportions. A kitchen where every cabinet interior was planned before the exterior was chosen, so that the storage works perfectly and the surfaces remain clear. In a New York studio, storage that is visible is storage that has been designed, arranged with the same consideration as a displayed collection rather than stuffed into available space. And storage that is concealed completely, behind flush doors that read as walls, inside ottomans that read as furniture, beneath platforms that read as architecture. Nothing in between. In most cities, windows are treated as sources of light and air, functional apertures in walls that happen to offer views of whatever lies outside. In New York, where even the most modest studio window frames a specific piece of the most visually complex city in the world, the window is treated as something else entirely. The most important artwork in the apartment, hung on the most prominent wall and framed accordingly. New York studio window treatments are designed to maximize the drama of the view rather than to provide privacy or light control as primary functions. Simple roller blinds and blackout fabric that disappear completely when raised, leaving the window as a clean, unobstructed frame for the city beyond. Minimal curtains in dark linen that frame the window theatrically rather than covering it domestically. Or no treatment at all, the glass left bare, the city permanently on display, the studio interior and the city exterior existing in continuous visual conversation. The New York studio that treats its window as art has an advantage that no amount of interior design can replicate. A constantly changing, infinitely detailed artwork that costs nothing and is unique to exactly this view from exactly this floor of exactly this building. The New York studio kitchen is, in most cases, the room that receives the most design attention relative to its size of any room in any city in the world, for the simple reason that it receives the most scrutiny. In a studio apartment, the kitchen is not a separate room. It is a wall of the living space, permanently visible from every seating position, present in every photograph, and impossible to ignore or close off from the rest of the apartment. This visibility forces a level of consideration that kitchens in separate rooms rarely receive. Every appliance is chosen for its appearance as well as its function. Open shelving, when used, holds only objects that are both useful and beautiful. The cast iron pan that is used daily and looks extraordinary. The ceramic vessels that hold everyday items and happen to be works of art. The countertop is kept almost entirely clear, because in a New York studio kitchen visible clutter is not a private domestic problem. It is a design failure visible from the sofa. The result is often the most beautifully considered kitchen in the building, not because New Yorkers care more about cooking than anyone else, but because their kitchen has nowhere to hide. Step back and look at the whole studio as one continuous, precisely considered space. Perhaps 30 square meters, perhaps less, containing everything needed for a complete and genuinely luxurious life in one of the world's most demanding cities. Dark walls that absorb the room's boundaries and make its limits less legible. Vertical space claimed and used from floor to ceiling. Distinct zones created through light and textile rather than through walls. One extraordinary piece that justifies every restrained decision around it. Storage treated as architecture. A window that frames the city as the best artwork money cannot buy. A kitchen where nothing is present by default. This is not luxury despite the constraints. This is luxury produced by the constraints. The specific, irreplaceable quality of a space where every decision was forced to matter, and where matching, consistently and completely, produced something that abundance alone never could. New York studios feel luxurious not because of what they contain, but because of what they cannot afford to waste. Every decision matters. Every surface earns its place. Every constraint becomes the reason for one more considered choice. Vertical space. Dark walls. One extraordinary piece. Storage as architecture. The city is art. Subscribe for a new interior video every week. And tell me in the comments, could you live in a New York studio? And what would your one extraordinary piece be?